Okay, so thanks for coming along. Sorry for the inconvenience to do technology, but here we are, and maybe this will work out better anyway. So this evening, I'm Luke. Next door is Julie. Julie's working really, really hard to make sure that she can address any questions that may come through. Obviously, she can't talk on behalf of the PNC or the OOSH, but she'll do her best to facilitate for us and funnel any questions towards the correct people. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, pay my respects to the elders past, present and future. If you have anything to add into the chat, you can do that. Julie will do her best to work through that. So this evening we've got with us, as well as a whole range of people from all over Thornley West and further afield. I've got Melanie Hogan and Claire King. So if they have both the label Claire King on the screen, but trust me, most certainly different people. They are the PNC executive here. We've also got Adam Yano, I saw here somewhere, and we have Michelle Koo.
And she said, "Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I don't mind going all there."
We might need to just mute those microphones if that's okay. So Adam and Michelle represent our OOSH committee, and as well as those roles here, Mel, Claire, Michelle and Adam, they're also parents at our school, and so they're part of the Thornley West community, and they all work really hard in their own roles to make things better for our school and for our kids. We've also got Courtney who's joined us. Courtney is the director of our OOSH service here. She has an insight into how the OOSH runs and can provide some of that background. Also, Courtney has a range of really good connections with other OOSH services and is able to provide that sort of feedback for us. So we're working through everything here. We've got some presentations that we're trying to work out how to share in a moment. I'm not exactly stalling, Claire, but I'm working through the screen share options as we speak. If everybody could leave those cameras off, that's just really about child protection and that sort of stuff to make sure that the video can go out. So what I might do is I might hand over to Mel, if that's all right. Mel, that gives me a few minutes to try to solve any technical issues in the background, and you can kick us off for the evening, which would be great.
Sure, thanks Luke, and thanks to all the other panelists and to Julie for moderating our chat this evening. So we're really excited to be here and hopeful to sort of share some further information with the broader community about the future running of OOSH services at Thornley West. I guess firstly, we just want to say that we feel that we have a great OOSH service at Thornley West that's currently sort of being actingly directed by Courtney, I think. And there's, I know, a number of the parent management committee, Adam and Michelle and various others online tonight. So I think that's fantastic that we're actually able to have as many people join a community forum as we can. So we do have a presentation prepared, and we're hopeful that we're going to be able to very momentarily start screen sharing that presentation and sort of starting to have this discussion. So how are we going there, Luke, in terms of the screen sharing?
I think we also just need to email out the new link, because we've had a few emails into our inbox just about the
link. So we might
just have a couple of minutes.
We might just have to have a couple of minutes recess while we actually email out the new link, because our inbox is getting flooded with emails of people wanting to join the new link. So we may have to take a momentary recess to allow Luke to allow screen sharing and for us to email our members to let them know how to find us in this meeting. So is that okay if we have a couple of minutes to get that sorted?
That sounds great to me. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, we think now we can screen share, and we've got the link to our members now via email. So we hope that everybody will be able to join us. The joys of technical difficulties in Thornley West, which we thought we'd plan for every eventuality, didn't we, Luke? But unfortunately, here we are. Yep. So obviously, as we said before, thanks to everyone for joining us for this really important presentation on out-of-school hours care services at Thornley West. So for those people that don't know me, I'm Mel Hogan, the president of the PNC, and sitting next to me and also presenting tonight is Claire King, who's the current treasurer of the PNC. So that's just the introductions. We'll just flick through. So we just wanted to let everybody know in terms of our P&C Executive Committee, the current members that we have that utilise the OOSH service. So there are 4 members of our current Executive Committee, and that equates to about 40% of our members that you can see listed there of our current Executive Committee do currently use the OOSH service at school. So just so that everyone is clear about that. In terms of housekeeping, so what are we looking at tonight? The purpose of this is to look forward to the options that are available in terms of running an OOSH service at Thornley West Public School into the future. So what's important to note is this presentation is not particularly related to the current OOSH service, but how we can look to the future and provide a sustainable and supportive OOSH service going forward. Julie there is moderating the chat function for us. So if you have questions, we assume that like in the webinar format that you'll be able to submit those via the Zoom chat function. So if you'd be able to submit those, Julie will help us to group those and answer those in the Q&A session afterwards. And just reiterating, I think this hasn't changed, Luke, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that we will have a recording of this session available for those people who are unable to make it. And just obviously that the questions that are asked here are done in live time, so they haven't been pre-submitted to us prior. So I guess what we want to sort of share with the community firstly is a timeline of how have we gotten to where we are now? Because obviously I'm sure most people here that use the OOSH service agree that we have a fantastic OOSH service at our school. But unfortunately, due to some recategorisations, there are going to be some changes to how OOSH services operate at Thornley West Public School into the future. So how did we get here? So back in December of 2020, there were some communications from a peak body to the Department of Education regarding the categories of OOSH providers in public schools in New South Wales. In early 2021, so we're going nearly 2 years back now, the Department of Education engaged external legal experts to conduct a review of provider categorisation in New South Wales in schools that run OOSH services. So in late 2021, I think it was around the 16th of December, those outcomes were revealed. And ultimately what it showed is that many service providers were categorised correctly, and therefore there was no change. Unfortunately for Thornley West, prior to the 16th of December 2021, there was Category A, and inside Category A, there was Category A1 that was P&C run OOSH services, and those OOSH services are run under the Parents and Citizens Association Act of 1976, and there was a Category A2, which was other parent-run not-for-profit services. During the course of that review, the Department of Education realised that based on their pre-existing criteria, that the services that fell into the A2 category did not meet the criteria for Category A, and therefore at the end of their current licence period, they would be recategorised to the correct category of Category B. So I guess what that means for us is that the OOSH licence that we had at our TWOOSH actually expired, is my understanding, in January of this year, and that was the end of their current licence period. And so obviously at the end of that period, the Department of Education was going to look to categorise them correctly. So whilst the policy really has not changed, it is a practical change because our TWOOSH was incorrectly categorised as a Category A service when it should have been a Category B service. So looking at the options moving forward, so essentially we would have the option to transition the out of school hours care service to being a P&C run service, or alternately there would be an open tender process to sort of discover a provider that would provide OOSH services at our school. So you can just see here on the screen now, you can see the categories. So the only provider that now falls correctly into Category A are out of school hours care services run by Parents and Citizens Associations incorporated under the Parents and Citizens Association Act. In terms of Category B services, they are not-for-profit organisations other than those organisations categorised in Category A. and category C services are for-profit organisations. And what that means for us at Thornley West Public School and other public schools is that only category A providers are exempt from that open tender process. So prior to now, TWOOSH, as it is run under a parent management committee, was classed as category A2 and wouldn't have been required to participate in an open tender. But now that category has been corrected, is now classed as category B service and will be required to participate in an open tender to continue running a service in the same way that they do now. Have you got anything to add there, Luke, to that categorisation?
No, I think that sums it up quite well. And I know that Adam and Michelle have got some comments about that as well in their presentation.
Okay.
So I guess this is just reiterating those options again. So one option would be the tender process. Another option would be to have no OOSH service at our school, which we don't feel is the
preferred option.
So we won't be talking to that option, but we will be talking to the options of a tender process and also the option of a P&C run service at our school. So I guess just to go into those, the option that we feel is most like our current setup would be the tender option, where TWOOSH could be potentially successful at that tender process, and the running would remain mostly similar to how it is now, with a parent management committee and a responsible person who could be an employee.
Like the centre director, for example. And they can actually, through a commercial provider, the commercial provider is able to delegate the running of the service day to day to a qualified, paid, responsible person. And they're also able to maintain a parent advisory committee. And likely, staff and fees would hopefully remain unchanged. And certainly that's what we've heard in terms of other facilities that have sort of progressed down this pathway.
However, I guess the difference with a P&C run service is that under the legislation the P&C is incorporated under, we cannot delegate the responsibilities of a responsible person to a paid employee. So it must be a board member or committee member, of course, who you would understand from the P&C. Unfortunately, Mel and I do not get paid for the work that we do. Neither do any of our colleagues on the exec committee of the P&C. So that is the major difference between the P&C run option versus the tender process and those providers incorporated under different legislation.
So we're going to talk more about that, but I guess what we just want to flag for everybody before we go forward is that something that has been discussed quite broadly in terms of our recent P&C meetings by Luke, and also in terms of, I think there's been some newsletter information on this as well, is that there's been a substantial change in student enrolments at Thornley West Public School. So last year, back in 2021, we had about 590 enrolments. This year we have about 545 enrolments. And then according to Luke's projections, we expect that to go down by about 10 students at the end of this year, a further 35 students at the end of next year. And those numbers look like they're going to continue to decline until we reach about 400. Is that correct, Luke? That's your understanding? Have I captured that correctly?
Yeah, we're expecting by the time we fast forward about 7 years, that we'll probably be pulling in cohorts of between 50 and 60 kindergarten students, whereas at the moment we have, I believe, 97 year fives. So all the cohorts are projected to get smaller.
So I guess what does that mean for our OOSH? So in terms of at the moment, and what we've had a look at, I know people have contacted us very concerned about potentially, having a commercial provider come in and that costing families more, which obviously puts pressure on families in terms of the already rising cost of living and the expensive house prices in our area, which is potentially driving down our enrolment numbers because it's very expensive to buy into 120. So in terms of what we've got there, and this information is freely available on the Childcare Finder website, that you can see the link down there that you're able to go and have a look at your leisure. But we did have a look at an extensive number of OOSH services in our area, sort of everywhere between Hornsby Heights and Lane Cove. And at the moment, you can see where our OOSH service is sitting. So we'll just be transparent. These are the fees for the OOSH service that we have at our school for 2023. So just to be transparent, so you can have a look at, there is some parent management run services on that list, there is some P&C run services on that list, and there is some commercial providers. But what's important to note is at Carlingford West, their OOSH was run by a parent management committee until May of 2022. And until the present time, there have not been any change in fees, and many of their staff have actually continued on to work for the commercial provider. So we don't know in terms of staffing or in terms of fees exactly what that would look like, but we can only sort of draw to other services that have progressed down that pathway and have a look at what's happened for them. So I guess here we have to look at, is a P&C run OOSH service viable in our community? And what we would look at is, in terms of our executive committee, the people that come to our P&C meetings, we have had 3 key positions vacant out of 11 for the entirety of this year. And none of those executive committee are qualified to run a childcare centre as a volunteer. And we obviously, by nature as an organisation, have a reasonably high turnover of committee, because we host an AGM every 12 months, and quite possibly office bearers could be turning over in their entirety each 12 months. It's probably important to understand as well that this year at our AGM, we only had 1 office bearer stand. And without a minimum of 2 office bearers, we can't transact on our bank accounts. So it was just very lucky that a couple of people did stand after the AGM at the March general meeting, which meant our staff could continue to be paid. In terms of volunteering more widely, we did host a survey earlier this year that told us that 80% of our community would like to see us run as many or more business units and as many or more events, but only 20% of people actually said that they had any capacity to volunteer. And whilst that's sort of hard to quantify, we know that our sign-ups are very rarely signed up to their full capacity. And we've had to reduce the sign-up times from 2 hours to 1 hour to actually cater to people's availability. So if we were going to run an OOSH service at our school, what would that mean? So I guess we have to be careful that we don't just look to the next 12 months, that we look to the next 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, because what we want to make sure is that we're running a sustainable service, not a service that's going to go well for 12 months because we have a group of parents that are particularly interested in it at that time or particularly passionate about it, but how we can run a continuous service for the children of Thornley West Public School over the years ahead. And what does that look like for a P&C? So we expect, based on our conversations with the P&C Federation and viewing the department's webinars and other information that we've been able to receive, and we tend to go to education about once a week on this topic, we expect that there would be a significant workload associated with the running of an OOSH. So in terms of regulatory requirements, in terms of financial requirements, so it is very important to know that at the moment, our current OOSH, I think they employ over 30 staff, and they have a bookkeeper that prepares the wages and the salaries, for example, and they're then able to prepare that, and the centre director and the centre leadership team are able to pay those salaries. In terms of what it would look like under a P&C model, that no money can be spent from P&C bank accounts without a minimum of 2 office bearers approving those payments. So when we set up our budget for the year, obviously if we were running an OOSH, the OOSH service would have an approved operating budget. So anything within that budget spend would then need to be approved to leave the bank by 2 office bearers. And there are obviously substantial financial transactions in running an OOSH. If anything outside of that operating budget would then need to wait to come back before an ad hoc meeting and an ad hoc motion before the general membership. So if we've decided we've under budgeted on bread, for example, and our budget has been reached to buy bread, we have to wait until there is another general meeting to pass an ad hoc motion. So it also, in terms of regulatory requirements, like reporting in terms of working with children checks, it is the office bearers that need to be registered with the Office of the Children's Guardian, like we do now if we have band tutors or if we have our current employees. It is our job to ensure we are meeting working with children check requirements. Staff management is another thing that cannot be delegated. So if we're doing recruitment, we do need to make sure that we are involved in that recruitment. That is it's a service that the office bearers cannot delegate to a paid employee. Same goes for risk assessment, risk profiling, work health and safety, and appropriate insurances, whether that be workers' compensation, volunteer insurance, or other insurance. And I guess we have to find out, is there a group of volunteers out there that are happy to run $1 million plus childcare service as volunteers when there are substantial jobs that, unlike the current Parent Management Committee, the office bearers of the P&C cannot delegate? So I guess now we're just going to have a very quick look at what is a responsible person. So, Julie, do you have a question? Because your hand's up. Do you want to ask a question?
There's a couple of questions on a common theme in the chat. First one around the quality of service, not just the cost of service, and linked to that, a question around the comparison fees there, just to confirm, were all of those fees based on 2023?
Yes, so in terms of the quality, so obviously we want the best quality service to be in our local setting and in our local context. That's something that's very important. And the tender process is not tailored to, from my understanding, Luke, about finding the cheapest or the most sort of financially viable service. It's tailored to finding the best service for our setting. So whilst the P&C doesn't set the tendering process, we are mindful of the content of the tendering process that actually, forms the responses that tenderers put into their tender application goes on to form part of their contract with the Department of Education. So it's very important that they actually provide the realistic and relevant information and transparent information in the tender documents to make sure that the DET and the tender panel can make the most sensible decision and the best decision for the context. Luke, do you have anything you want to add to that in terms of finding a quality service?
Now that probably sums it up fairly well. The implications for the school and community are considered. Obviously, there are some financial considerations, but I have been on a panel for a canteen, which is almost the same process, and the tenderer that made the most attractive offer financially wasn't successful.
And I guess with the other information, so we are sort of in a uniquely fortunate position that we know what our fees for TOOSH are going to be in 2023 at our school. And whereas with other services, we only have the privilege of looking at what they are now. So we don't know if those services are advertising their fees for 2022 or their fees for 2023. We just know that they're the most up-to-date fees that we're able to access that are freely available. So certainly we encourage anyone and everyone to have a look at, I guess, fact-checking that information by following that website and having an understanding for themselves about what other local fees, both commercial, PMC and PNC, are charging families to access an OOSH service. So I guess now moving on in terms of the legislation here. So why do PNCs have that sort of, I guess, monopoly to be free from tender running an OOSH service in the public education system in New South Wales? So I guess the reason for that is the PNC, as we said, is incorporated under the Parents and Citizens Associations Incorporations Act of 1976. So what that means is that Incorporation Act fits under the Minister for Education of Section 117 of the Education Act of 1990. And that enables the principal as an ex officio member of the PNC and all of its subcommittees to have a substantial degree of oversight into the financial administration, the regulation, and the operation of our entity. Now, the next one in terms of responsible person.
Please add to that.
Yep.
And I guess as well, under the Incorporations Act of Parents and Citizens Associations, the PNC is bound to the school for which it is incorporated, with.
We have mutual aims.
By name, and the PNC is bound to work in the best interest of the school and supporting the school.
through its constitution. So the aims directly benefit all of the students of the school in terms of our work. So I guess just looking at responsible people, because someone has to be a responsible person for an entity if the P&C were to operate an OOSH service at our school. Now, there is a little bit of confusion because under childcare legislation, the responsible person is very often described as the nominated supervisor. So the person who runs that childcare centre and provides the care to children day to day. So no one expects that P&C office bearers are going to be going to hand out apples for afternoon tea or to taste kids around the playground. That's not the role of the responsible person that we're talking about today. What we're talking about in terms of a P&C perspective is the responsible person must be an officer or an office bearer of the association. So that's either the president, the vice presidents, the treasurer, and the secretary are the office bearers. Now, someone did raise a question with me today. Can we add more office bearers so it spreads the load to be able to run an OOSH service? The answer to that question is no, because our office bearers are prescribed under our constitution. So unfortunately, we can't add more people to share the workload. So that's an important thing to note. So we may run an OOSH service as a P&C under a subcommittee model or under a directly reporting model. But what the important thing is that the office bearers need to manage the day-to-day aspects of the service, and they mustn't be paid employees. So in terms of financial operation, and this comes straight from our governing documents, the P&C bank accounts must be operated by 2 or more officers of the association delegated in that behalf by the association. So no commitment shall be entered into for the expenditure of association funds except by resolution of the membership. So that means we need 2 things to happen. We need a budget approved by the members, and we need office bearers to pay money out of the account. So I guess we have to look at the magnitude at the moment of we have about 5 staff that we need to pay, and there's obviously 5 or 6 subcommittees that we're running, and that takes time. But if we're looking at taking on an entity that has 30 plus staff, that's a very different proposition in terms of investment.
So I guess this is kind of how we're thinking about it in terms of what P&C members need to consider when considering whether or not we can take on an OOSH. We need to consider what the P&C can do and what the P&C has capacity to do. So things we can do are things that are within the law, within our skill set, things that are ethical, things that the P&C has capacity to do is in terms of financial, in terms of do we have the money to do that? Do we have the time and the volunteers to do that? And then also considering the things in the middle, they're the things we're already doing well. So, you know, we need to...
takes up a lot of that middle bit. That star does cover a lot of that middle section of the Venn diagram already.
But we also need to then consider, can we do that for 1 year? Can we do that for 5 years? Can we do it for 10 years? And Mel mentioned that earlier. You know, we don't want to have an OOSH service that we can only run for 1 year. We want to have an OOSH service that as a parent of a child who attends OOSH 10 sessions a week, most of the time, 9 sessions sometimes, you know, I don't want to have an OOSH service that I can't guarantee is going to be there next year. I want to make sure that, you know, in 10 years time when my last child's at school, that there'll be an OOSH service available. That's, you know, a high quality service.
And what's important for us as well, as we said before, is if we actually, you know, take on an OOSH and then we get to an AGM next year, the year after that, and there's only one office bearer, automatically, and Luke, I'm sure, has some understanding of this, our association automatically goes into recess, and the school would need to step in to operate its functions as best as possible on an interim basis. So we would run a risk of potentially not being able to pay our staff effective immediately if we took on a service without the appropriate capacity. Luke, do you have anything you want to add there in terms of sustainability?
Yeah, and I think from everybody's point of view tonight, sustainability is the number one priority for all of us. We want the OOSH to continue to run and provide a service for our community. I have been a principal at a school where I had a P&C that did overcommit itself, and in the end they did go into recess and the school assumed the functions of the P&C. However, through that process, I made sure that the services were still delivered to the kids. So I don't think that anybody here is suggesting for a moment that we're going to have a break in continuity, because I know that both the P&C and the school and the OOSH committee are really committed to that. but I think we do need to consider this as part of the P&C conversation.
Julie, I think you've got some more questions from the chat.
So just around that, a thread around the P&C running an OOSH service itself, and in many schools that do have the P&C running the P&C, how could that be explained? How is it perhaps that P&Cs are able to do it?
Yeah, so this is a really good question and one that we have looked into substantially. And I guess we can't speak for any and all P&Cs that run OOSH services, and unfortunately through this process, the P&Cs that are running OOSH services are also going to get reviewed to make sure they are running those services in accordance with the legislation. And I'm not saying there are plenty of services out there that are not, but I think given the workload it takes for a P&C to run an OOSH service, it can be a difficult thing to meet the guidelines. But certainly what we've learned is we're not aware at this stage of any P&C services that have transitioned to take on the running of an OOSH service. Predominantly what we've found is the P&Cs that run OOSH services have always run them. You know, our P&C used to run an OOSH service up to 2015, at which time there was a substantial change in legislation and a substantial change in the role of the office bearers in running the entity and the OOSH service. And that's when many P&Cs like ours ceased running OOSH services and they transitioned to parent management committee run models. And we've not heard of any local services that have transitioned back from being parent management committee run models to P&C run models. What we're also seeing is the few services that we are aware of that run OOSH services are larger schools. So we're looking at Beecroft that has an enrolment of about 1,000 to 1,100 students at the moment, I believe. They have a much larger volunteer pool, I guess, to draw from. And certainly their office bearers, that takes a lot of effort to succession plan. They no longer have an OOSH subcommittee because there wasn't the volunteers, and the OOSH staff actually report directly to their office bearers. So there is a substantial volunteer load. We can't speak to all of the OOSHs, but what we can speak to is those being potentially larger schools that have always run an OOSH service rather than transitioned during this process back to running an OOSH service that had subsequently been run by them some time ago.
We're not saying it's not possible, but I think what we need to
be aware
is what's possible in our circumstances, in our context. And I guess that's where we've kind of tried to present some information about what our local context is in terms of a shrinking school and what we know our capacity and our skill set already is.
Yeah. So we'll just keep going. We haven't got too many more slides to go. So what does it look like for the P&C to run a service? And I think a big lot of the questions have been around if our OOSH has a deed of variation that extends their license through to January 2024, why are we having discussions in October and November of 2022? So hopefully this slide will help shed a little bit of light on that, is that, you know, what needs to happen for us to run an OOSH? Should we choose to do that in terms of the membership motioning that? We would need to firstly receive a carried special resolution from the current OOSH members. So that means 75% of people need to carry a special resolution saying that they would like to close down the current OOSH and to have the OOSH services at Thornley West Public School transition to being a P&C run service. So that takes time. We would then need to undergo a due diligence process, and that cost of that's about $10,000 to $15,000, and that's borne solely by the P&C. We have been told there are some grants that are becoming available. So if you ultimately expend that money and you then do become a P&C run service, there is some sort of return of those funds through grants, but they only become available not when you expend the funds, but when you commence operating the OOSH. We then have a look at, you know, needing to have the membership review that due diligence report and understand what the recommendations of that report is. There'd then be contract negotiations. OOSH begins its wind up. The P&C would need to undertake its regulatory obligations, so applying for accreditation as a childcare provider, applying to be a CCS provider, transferring of license. So it is really important to note that essentially the OOSH doesn't transfer to the P&C. the current OOSH service wraps up its operations and a new service commences with the PNC. So we can't transfer that license to the PNC. The PNC has to apply for a new license, and obviously all of that information is available on the PNC Federation website as well. And I think what's important to note that whilst as a PNC we operate under democratic processes, we're a member-driven organisation. Ultimately, even if our members are very, very keen to become a PNC-run OOSH service, unless we've got absolute certainty there is capacity, that's going to be very tricky, because Luke, doesn't need to come to our membership to pass a motion. And if he senses, even after this process, that there perhaps is not the capacity for us to run an OOSH service in our local setting, that he may need to make a call about the future of OOSH services to ensure their sustainability. Luke, have I got that right?
Yeah, that's right. So at the moment, we're really trying to do together is to work through all options that are available. But at the end of the day, it's important for the community, it's important for the school that we have the continuity of service, and ultimately what would trigger the tender process would be me alerting asset management that that's the direction that we would need to go.
Okay, Julie, do you have another question?
Sure, another couple of themes. So who makes the decision on who wins the tender? Does the school PNC or parents have input into that decision?
Yeah, so I think we're just about to get onto the tender, so I might just hold those questions and to the next slide. So this is just an overview, a really brief overview of the tender process, but I think it's important to highlight that the aims of a tender process are to ensure a high quality service for students and parents, an equitable process free from bias and conflicts of interest, and a service that it's a process to identify the best overall value.
And that doesn't mean necessarily financial or monetary value, but the overall best value overall. And
so this is the structure of the tender process. Obviously, like, we're not going to go through the whole tender process, but
you can review the entire tender form. We have sent out the link to all of our members and put it on Facebook. The DOT has run a webinar, and if you have any interest in watching that, it's about halfway through the tender-based webinar, and you can see all of the questions that tenderers do get asked.
Yeah, so it's the last link on the FAQs we sent out and have circulated on Facebook as well. So it's the last link. It's about a 40-minute video, but if you start about halfway through, you'll skip right to the tender section, and you can see the DET talk right through each step of the tender process. And so I guess this is a few things which gets to that question. So, the DET and the school, obviously, they are highly involved in the tender process. A tender panel would consist of the principal, a DET rep, and a community rep. It's really awkward talking about Luke in front of him as the principal, but anyway. And I think, there's a few things that tender panel would need to consider, so that I just like to highlight. So one is staff. One is a parent advisory committee, which is one of the tender questions specifically, is how does the tenderer aim to engage with parents, and what's their plan?
And if they don't, why do they not intend to engage with parents at a local level to have some parent input into the running of the service?
And of course, it does talk to fees, because we obviously want to make sure we don't, have a service which has exorbitant fees, which families can't afford to pay. There's also, I guess, a consideration around space, and, that goes into the DET's negotiations with any provider, including the PNC or our current provider or any other provider, around what spaces in the school may be used for running of the OOSH, and, what spaces are required to meet the legislative requirements around running a childcare service, which, 3.25 square metres per child, indoor space, free floor space is what is required. So I guess we're getting to next steps.
Where do we go to from here? How do we sort of work our way forward from here?
So Mel and I and our executive committee on the PNC, which they're all online, but too many to name. So we appreciate all of them immensely, though. We want to make sure that there's certainty for the children, there's certainty for families, there's certainty for the TWISH staff, and also for the school staff, because this is an upheaval for everybody in our community. And, that's to no fault of anybody, any one of us. It's obviously coming directly from the Minister for Education. So our plan as a PNC is to have a general meeting of the PNC on Tuesday, the 29th of November, which is our
final general meeting for the year.
And we, had initially intended to vote on this matter at that meeting. We have decided to withhold that vote at that meeting and instead hold a special meeting the following week on Wednesday, the 7th of December. So that means that anybody who is not currently a financial member or anyone who has signed up since the close of the last meeting has until the close of the meeting on the 29th of November to sign up and become a financial meeting, which would enable
financial member
to enable them to vote at the meeting on the 7th of December.
That's right.
So there is still quite a significant amount of time. It's like 19 days.
19 days you
counting.
have.
Probably don't leave it till the meeting.
So what will we be voting on at that meeting? So there's two options that we are going to proceed with the due diligence process. So that's the first option. The second option is that, and I guess
we are requested,
yes, exactly. If we get a carried special resolution from the OOSH members, do we want to proceed with the due diligence process? And noting again that was probably, we're estimating between $15,000 and $20,000. And so the second option is, do we think that we know enough now, based on preliminary inquiries and all of the education that we've attended and all of the education that we've shared with our community, to not proceed with looking into running an OOSH service for whatever reason that might be? I guess we're just conscious that we don't want to expend $20,000 of PNC funds, which could go a long way to benefit students at school through laptops or library books or literacy. If we feel that there isn't the capacity within the PNC to run an OOSH service sustainably for a prolonged period. But we can't decide at the moment that we're definitely taking on the OOSH regardless. The options on that meeting, the 7th of December, will be, would we like to proceed with due diligence, or do we feel that we sort of are aware that it would be beyond the capacity of the PNC to run an OOSH service? And unfortunately, as we've said to a few people, it is a little bit tricky in terms of understanding that more fully. It is very hard for the PNC to run an OOSH service, and that's why you get the coveted position of being a Category A provider, because there are so many rules and regulations and legislation under which you're bound to act that sort of safeguards the community.
And I just draw us back to this slide because I think the main reason why we feel it is important to make this decision expediently is to make sure that we do have that certainty, and because of this timeline that it takes over, close to 18 months before the PNC would be able to run an OOSH service at our school. And at the moment, if we make a decision, in November or December this year, we're still looking past the current expiry date of the OOSH service. So, we would be then going to the DT to request further extensions. So I guess just to close, I think
a couple of questions there.
Very last slide.
The PNC meeting there.
Yeah.
A question around is attendance at the 29th of November meeting necessary to be able to vote?
No, so you don't need to attend the 29th of November meeting. No voting will go on there. But equally, we do want to make it clear to people, because we've had a good 2-hour discussion at our October meeting and we're hosting this presentation tonight, we need to leave the November 29 meeting free to sort of undertake our general business and our regular planned business. But no, you don't need to attend. You can come solely to the 7th of December meeting and have a voice in the vote. But obviously what we need to look at is, if you're unable to attend PNC meetings and unable to volunteer, that would, I guess, lead us to the point that it is trickier to run an OOSH service if people are signing up solely to vote and actually don't have the capacity to volunteer to assist us towards running an OOSH service, if that's ultimately the position of the membership.
Thanks, Mel. And another meeting question around thinking that the PNC had previously voted in support of undertaking due diligence.
Yeah, so of course, that was a decision made by the PNC, I think back in August or July. However, I guess as further information has come to light, it is our obligation as office bearers to share any further information with our membership. And that's what then led to the vote at the October meeting of the PNC to
to sustain from any sort of further discussions.
And to have this town hall.
And to have a town hall meeting and actually to sort of, you know, bring those preliminary inquiries that have been undertaken in the time that has elapsed, because obviously since we had that general meeting where we took that vote, we haven't had any sort of notification in terms of that special resolution. And to be able to sort of make a move forward in terms of these decisions, we've needed to undertake some preliminary investigations. And that's now what we're taking back to that special meeting for a vote on the 7th of December.
And so the resolution we made in about due diligence was that we would be prepared to do due diligence if TWOOSH approached us with a formal request for that to be undertaken. And that has not occurred to this date.
Julie, do you have
just another question around the timing of the voting? Would it happen before the New South Wales state election? Noting Labor is considering its position on issue and has met with network community activities.
Yes, so that is yes, because I guess from all of the information that we've received, you know, from Luke and from the P&C Federation and from other advice, that there is really, I mean, no votes in actually working to change this legislation, whereas there is votes in providing high quality OOSH services in public schools. So whilst, you know, the government may change in March, it may change sometime in the future, we have to look at whether or not there's actually votes in working through a change in legislation. And Luke, and certainly the P&C Federation, feels that that's not possible. Have we got that right, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, and obviously I've got to preface this by I work for whichever government's in power on the day, but yeah, my understanding is it's a long-held policy that's been there through various parties. Of course, it may change, but I will be very surprised. I don't feel there's any votes in it, but maybe I'll be proven wrong.
So I guess that's the end of our presentation, and so back to you, Luke.
So
unless anyone has any more questions, we're very happy to answer more questions now or at the end, but we're happy to hand back over to you.
Okay, so I think there's a question that's just come through from me, actually. It says, what if nobody is taken up through the tender process? Look, I don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is that as a school, we would make sure that there is always an OOSH here. Whether that means that there would be a license extension, whether that means that we would get a temporary provider in, as some other schools have done, I don't know. I would presume that someone would get the tender, but one way or the other, there would be something there for the kids. Michelle has just posted a question. If a new OOSH provider were appointed, would there be consideration for existing OOSH employees to join the new provider? I'm so sorry, I can't speak for new providers. I have known, I've heard on the grapevine that has happened in other services, but I really can't answer that question. It's a bit too unknown.
I guess, Luke, if I could add to your response, I think the DET policy on providing and expanding on OOSH positions within public schools is quite clear, and the government is quite supportive of increasing OOSH services and availability for parents. So I think, yeah, the likelihood, and I guess that just adds to what you've said, Luke, is low. But also, the likelihood of not having a service is pretty low. But also, you know, we do have the one example at Collingwood West where YMCA did take over, and many of the staff, is what we understand from YMCA, did transition across to employment under YMCA.
And so I've got one question here, and I'm eager to get onto our OOSH committee who are, you know, have got presentation for us as well tonight. Hannah's asked, how many times can you extend the current license? The real answer is you can't. But I guess what I was referring to is if we're in a situation where we had no other tenderer, we would obviously have to find a solution, and that would require some creative thought, which I would put my energies into, as I'm sure all of you would as well. This last question, Mel, might be best for you. I don't know the answer to this. Kelly's asking, so to clarify, the nominated supervisor must be a P&C committee volunteer member only?
stop.
Yeah, so look, what we're in terms of, I think we need to draw a very clear separation between the nominated supervisor of the centre. So that's in childcare legislation, that's the centre director. So they're responsible for providing the children care each and every day and the running of the day-to-day operation of the centre. When we speak about responsible person, we're talking about the person that is listed on the ACNC as the responsible person for the entity. So the person that is responsible for the overall management, compliance, governance, and financial administration of the centre. So what we can see here now, so if we look at, this is an excerpt taken today from the ACNC. So our current responsible people at TWOOSH are Jenna and Courtney and Simone and Anne and Adam and Michelle. They're our current responsible people. So under a PMC run model, our parents on that committee can delegate all, or very nearly all, as far as I'm aware, of their responsibilities to the centre director. Whereas if you look at the current PNC, the responsible people for our entity are Claire King, Gary Capel, John Hogan, and Melanie Hogan. We cannot delegate, whether it's for the running of an OOSH or any other entity, our responsibilities in that regard. Does that answer the question, Luke?
Yes, I believe so. So there are still some questions here that need to be answered, but I'm really conscious of OOSH. I'd really like to be able to hand over to the OOSH committee. So I think we've got Michelle and Adam's joined us from his trip. So welcome both of you, and I'll hand the floor over.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Just waiting for, I think, Michelle, you're going to set some slides up. Great.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Let me stop share. Sorry, are you seeing multiple screens? Are you?
Yes.
Let me see. 1 second.
Always fun, this technology. But while Michelle's doing that, just by way of a quick introduction, my name's Adam Viviano. I'm the current TWOOSH Management Committee President, and I've been a member of the TWOOSH Management Committee now for 5 years, essentially since my son started in kindy here at the school. He's currently in year 4, so that explains my tenure here. And yeah, so I guess today what we're going to do is just run through a bit of a briefing on who the committee are, what we do, how we do it. Much of the challenges that have been mentioned from the PNC's point of view, we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I guess that's just a matter of working out whether or not what we do and how we operate the centre, or oversee the centre, maybe probably a better term. How that may translate to the structures that the PNC are able to operate with. But it looks like you're up and running now, Michelle, so I'll pass back to you. You're going to kick off first.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being part of tonight's forum. As Adam has said, we are just here to give you the TWOOSH perspective. We are aware that you have been online for a long time, and I don't think you just want to be listening to all of us talk. If you have questions, please feel free to ask along the way. If you are listening to this recording after the fact, thank you. Thank you for taking time to just engage with this really, really important issue for our community. Alongside Adam's introduction, I have been part of the TWOOSH committee also, we've realized, since 2018 as well, since my son was in year 1. With us tonight, we also have the TWOOSH team, Courtney, who's happy to answer sort of any questions from an OOSH perspective. They are the people who live and breathe this on a daily basis. A big thank you before we continue just to the rest of the executive committee who's also here online, who's sort of helped us put together this presentation. So TWOOSH really is an accredited not-for-profit service serving Thornlie West since 2000. We are staffed, and we are very proud of this, staffed and operated by a team of qualified, trained and dedicated OOSH educators. And we do pride ourselves in attracting high quality, trained and experienced OOSH educators. And you would see that from the tenure of many of our permanent staff, this is a testament to what a great workplace TOOSH is. We have been operating as an independent parent managed committee managed center, since 2015, with a volunteer parent guardian committee who are appointed at the AGM each year. So the committee comprises an executive team and up to 6 general members. We all come from a variety of professional and personal backgrounds, each of us bringing a very unique contribution to the committee. We are responsible, as Adam has said, for providing oversight and strategic direction to ensure that TOOSH is run sustainably and successfully. So parent involvement in the committee is not a new thing. It is in fact a compulsory thing without which TOOSH cannot exist. It is an integral part of what we do. And we have been very fortunate to have a very stable and well-supported committee, which has enabled the centre to prosper and grow. During my time on the committee, which is, this is my 5th year serving in various capacities, we have never had issues filling executive positions in the committee. And we are really well surrounded by people, like-minded parents who are eager to see this service succeed. Over the recent years, the committee has successfully navigated TOOSH through multiple challenges that we've not encountered before, from bushfires to power failures to, yep, you name it, that global pandemic, and currently this licensing change. So we do understand the complexity of what is ahead of us. We are not walking into this blindly. At the same time, we also understand the power of a community coming together with the same resolve to serve and to make sure that we have a continuing service. So we have been through that overused word, unprecedented things before. We have navigated it and come out the other end successful and still thriving and still existing. We realize what is ahead of us is complicated. I suppose what our main plea is, and Adam will elaborate on this more, is that time has been given to us. It was mentioned to us that our license has expired. That was what was said in January 2022. That is correct. So extensions have been given all these changes. And just to paint a picture of how complicated this whole thing is, since the announcement in December 2021, the milestone of the extensions that have been given to OOSHers like us to make a new plan has already in itself changed 3 times. Started off as December 2022, changed to June 2023, and just a couple of weeks ago has once again shifted to June 2025 for those who are willing to work with their local PNC to consider a transfer. So all we're saying is there is no need for us to rush into this. Clearly, the department itself has recognized what a complex situation this is and has given us sort of extra time. So so we'll just elaborate on that a little bit more. So each day, 30 to 60 kids come to OOSH before school, and 75 to 150 of them come to OOSH after school. We have pretty much TOOSH Treasurer oversees the financial aspects, and Anne is online tonight, oversees the financial aspects of the organization with day-to-day payroll and operating aspects managed by Courtney and her team, as well as an external bookkeeper. So TOOSH's finances are externally audited each year, which ensures the financial integrity of the service and that effective controls are in place. So this is always a bit of a sticking point, fees. Our committee would be very upfront to tell you that navigating fees is a very fine tightrope between balancing quality and viability of the service as well as costs to families. What we do have though is, as a parent managed TOOSH service, we actually have a say in this, and we directly control this conversation. And you who are TOOSH parents can also have a say in this. Our consideration is to attract trained high caliber educators to make sure that we run a high quality program and provide high quality food. You probably have children, if they go to OOSH, who complains because you pick them up just before late snack. There's a reason for that. I sometimes, when I smell late snack, I wish that I was there too, because it's that time of the dinner, just before dinner time, and you always kind of constantly feel, oh wow, these kids they are spoiled, and we are very blessed that they are being spoiled by our OOSH in a very nice way. What we also consider is investing in educator training and professional development. We want our staff to grow. We want to be able to cover increasing operating costs, of course. And I think, as someone has put in the chat, at the end of the day, it is not just about the cost. We are very conscious of cost. All of us have children ourselves in OOSH, and we just have to paint a balanced picture as to how we determine this. And when it comes to fee comparison, just a couple of notes. We have to be mindful of the quality and rating of the service. This is not a simple apple for apple and oranges for oranges. We have to compare other fees, search fees, term fees, membership fees. OOSH does not charge membership fees. Some other places do, on a termly basis or an annual basis. We talked about comparing the fees for that particular year. Our 2023 fees have actually only been released to families, so that is actually not publicly available yet either. So the other information that is that you can see online, it'll be in, we don't know what year that is, but just something to be mindful of. And also, where do operational surpluses go? What is it used for? That's another consideration. Talking about the quality as many of you will know, TOOSH is staffed by an amazing group of high quality educators led by Courtney, Beck and Tom. So this group of educators really make TOOSH the place that it is. And their commitment and hard work is instrumental in TOOSH being rated as an exceeding center, one of the few exceeding centers in our local area. We've said many times already that TOOSH is very much an integral part of the Thornlie West community, while our main role is to obviously provide before and after school care, as well as vacation care. One unique feature of having a community-run service is the opportunity for us to be able to give back to the school and the community. All surplus funds from TOOSH are used to improve the center and the service, or used to support the school and the community. So we, on the school level, have participated in the past in Spring Fair and voting days, where we might be doing face painting or whatever. We are there. We have contributed towards shared resources upgrade. For example, the PA system of the school, the senior room upgrade, the school garden, and the sandpit that you see outside of the TOOSH building. We have had the opportunity to be able to contribute to that. On a community basis, it's already been said before, the people that work for us, this is their job and their livelihood. And I guess as a committee, we just want to remind the community, everybody, that when we are talking about this, we are talking about people's jobs and people's livelihood as well. So just to be really mindful of that. We, as a group, do lots of different things. Most of you will probably have been to Friday breakfast that the team run for us. They also get involved in a variety of initiatives, from mental health initiatives such as Are You OK Day to various charity drives. So really, we are in a very unique position as a community and parent-led OOSH to be able to do all this and have the discretion to be able to engage in all this. So that comes up to the reason why we're here tonight. So with all this going really well, and PNC themselves have acknowledged that, why are we where we are today? And I'll just hand over to Adam to pick it up from there.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. And yes, about the next slide. So, we're speaking about the reasoning here is obviously this has been discussed by Melon earlier this evening in terms of how, you know, the categorization we fell under and how we use the school facilities. You know, we can argue semantics would have changed or whatever, but essentially the department did, from our point of view, the department eliminated the category which applies to us. You know, the sort of the legal machinery, I guess, underpinning that and sort of the underlying motives for the department, that's a matter for them. But from our point of view, you know, we were operating quite correctly under the license we had. We've got all that documented. We've never had a situation where, you know, there's never been any sort of thought process around the fact that we shouldn't be operating in this capacity. In fact, you know, centres like ourselves are, you know, are quite numerous throughout the state school system. So this, you know, from our point of view, the you know, this certainly did represent a change that impacted us. Next slide. No, but you know, I'm not at any point arguing specific semantics here, but that's how we see it. So yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that the options for us are to, you know, look at transferring or amalgamating the service with the PNC. You know, this is an operating model which which TOOSH, you know, used to be, in fact, operating under, and I wasn't around during the time when the service had, you know, changed into the incorporated entity that we are part of today. But you know, this is, you know, this I think is something where we're sort of, you know, looking at going back to the sort of way things used to be. And I guess the comment about, you know, how many OOSH services have gone back to the PNC. Well, you know, if there hasn't been any to date, you know, I guess this policy change is relatively new, and so you know, I think if we wind the clock forward a few years, you find that number has will have increased from 0 to quite a number, because, you know, if you're given the option of operating as an incorporated entity standalone, then, you know, many have taken up this choice. The fact that this choice is no longer available, I think that, you know, the difference between potentially farming the service out to an external entity where you don't have any control over how those excess funds are spent, or the type of involvement in the community. I think that's the decision we all have to make, versus you know, the community run service, and that's you know, those are really the two choices. And I guess should just flip the next slide now. I guess the question then is asked, okay, what's the situation with respect to you know, what does the community want? And so for me, personally, you know, this has been a you know, a wonderful experience to, you know, help lead an organisation, help put back into the community. And you know, the comment that was made about the effort involved in a parent-run organisation running a $1 million childcare centre. When I think of it like that, I go, wow, how did I even become here? Right? It's an amazing privilege. But the reality is, the service has been run by the parents of the Thornley West community, for Thornley West Public School community now for over 20 years. We were celebrating our 20th anniversary during 2020 of all years, and had to cancel a lot of festivities that we actually had planned for that period. But yeah, you know, the community has rallied when we needed them to rally. And as Michelle spoke of earlier, we've not come out of an AGM with vacant leadership positions. And you know, part of that, I think, is because, you know, the centre staff are you know, helpful in trying to find, you know, appropriately skilled professionals and appropriately skilled people who have the drive to be part of this. So, you know, in terms of where, you know, volunteers have come from our centre's point of view, you know, I think it's a different sort of pool of people. I know technically it's a very similar pool of people. You know, just on paper to whom the PNC can pull volunteers from, but it's a different function. You know, to me, this is about, you know, running a business, and you know, I was actually explaining. I'm up here in Singapore at the moment on work, and I was explaining, you know, what I was doing to one of our company's VPs, and he goes, "Wow, that's amazing. You know, you can stick that on your CV." And I go, "Yeah, absolutely. It is on my CV, right? It's exactly. You know, I've learned a hell of a lot, and I think that's the reason why, we've been able to, be able to find those who want to participate. And it's not simply a matter of saying, okay, well, people aren't going to be joining the PNC, therefore we're not going to think that we're not going to get volunteers for the OOSH. And this survey we ran, just recently, because we were asked we were asked by the PNC exec to just be sure, because they wanted to make sure with their $10,000 that to spend on the committing to spend on the due diligence process, that we actually were operating within our mandate, and we will certainly consider the special motion moving forward. But at least initially, I wanted to make sure we had a really good response rate to asking the question. Even our most frequented general meeting has only had about, I think, 40 people or so in it. So we had 79 responses from the survey that we did. And that nearly represents, they were nearly all were mutually exclusive families. So, 95% of people were aware that we looked changing our operating model, and 96% were in favour of remaining a not-for-profit service. Now, in terms of volunteering capacity, how does that sort of? I saw your hand go up there, Julie. So I'll finish up my comment and I'll come back to you. And how does that then equate to, how many people will actually do it when the rubber hits the road? Yes, I don't know the answer to that, by the way, but people say they want to volunteer, and or people say they want this type of service, and I guess it's really matter to the community to decide just how much they want it, right? It's that's essentially my position. So, Julie, I'll pass back to you. You had your hand up.
Yes, just a question around. It says there in the chat, what is the current chances of TOOSH winning a tender process, current TOOSH?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. How long is a piece of string? I think that the tendering process, from what I understand it to be, and to be honest, I've not had a lot of experience with tenders from this side of tenders from within the education system. I deal with tenders at work all the time. I pretty much tenders of my life responding to here in my sort of day job, and I think that the tenders are certainly geared up for larger organisations who are well versed at writing tenders and investing in those. I think there's certainly a school of thought that says that they have an advantage, but at the end of the day, this is unproven ground. Given that this policy shift has happened, perhaps there will be a bigger chance of parent-run services winning more of them. But that's a question for someone with a magic 8 ball, I guess.
I just wanted to make a point. There has been no PMC service win a tender previously, so unless there are changes to the process, it's quite unlikely.
Yes, and look, that's you can read between the lines. I think that's it's unlikely that we'd be able to win it.
Luke, could you give us some input from a DET perspective? Because it was our understanding from the tender process and the tender guidelines that there was some sort of preference to category B services over category C services, and there doesn't seem to be sort of disadvantage in the tendering questions as we've reviewed them, that a PMC would be disadvantaged. Can you give any input into that?
I can't comment on a preference for category B compared to category C, but in the materials which were part of some information that the PNC sent out earlier on this week, there were videos that led us through the tender process, and the director that was discussing those videos made it very clear that it doesn't matter how big and shiny your pamphlet is, etc., is just the one form that you fill in that makes the difference. And anything extraneous is excluded. So I guess in that way, they're trying to level the field. I believe that there's a degree of support for parent-run OOSHs from the Department of Education. But the comment that Courtney has just made, I have heard in other venues as well.
Yeah, so I guess tendering is what it is. It's the way the government goes about doing market tests for procuring products and services, and I guess by and large it does a reasonable job of achieving that in an open and transparent way. It's just that typically it doesn't favour the smaller person. And that's a bit of a philosophical discussion about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, and probably out of scope for this. It's probably more of a conversation for the pub with a beer, but that's for another time. But moving on. So at the end of the day, the decision we have to make is clear. So do we roll the dice with that, or and some of the thoughts that sort of we put down here and sort of what it might mean for the community, things along the lines of at the moment our charter is very clear. We operate solely to provide bush services to the community, to Tidor UPS. That is it. We don't have any other way of spending money. We don't have, for example, we've participated in in joint projects like the PA system in the past, and we do that because we can spend that money on those items because it benefits the OOSH service we run. So we're very tightly constrained on how we spend money, but we can look at we do and have done in the past decisions that actually benefit both organisations, because it certainly does fit within the mantra. And so an excellent organisation certainly wouldn't have that motivation. They've gotten access to a potentially money-making license, and they're going to use it within whatever bounds that they're going to fit within. So some unknowns as well. I see some questions in the chat. It's obviously an emotional subject regarding the impact on the TWISH staff, and to me this is one of the biggest drivers that I'm sort of right behind, and my personal motivation behind the way I'm sort of counselling the committee members at the moment in terms of strategies and whatnot is really about making sure we protect our staff as much as possible. And under a tender situation, that would certainly cause uncertainty. There's certainly no, they would obviously need staff to run the service here, whether they have their own staff already in surplus from other places or whatever. It's that'll be unknown. It's a matter for them to deal with. And so that is essentially we wouldn't really know what would happen there. So Julie.
Question around the responsible persons delegating some of that work to the subcommittee and or director, why they can't do that, if there's any further info on that.
Yeah, that's probably, look, I think I need to actually get a better understanding of that, because there are some differences between the PNC subcommittee operating model and how we operate. But that is certainly on my to-do list to get a much clearer picture of that, because there are some things there that I think I don't fully understand, and I need to make sure that I do.
So can we answer that question, Julie, if that's possible? Because I guess from a PNC perspective, it's very clear under our governing documents, whether that be the Act, the prescribed constitution, or our bylaws, that our ability to delegate, we could not list our centre director as a responsible person on the ACNC listing. And anyone is very welcome to go to the ACNC to determine what a responsible person does. And that obviously will tell you at the moment, Courtney or Jenna prior to Courtney was able to actually, perform the roles of a responsible person. But unfortunately under a PNC model, that wouldn't be possible. So whilst we can, delegate some of the day-to-day running of the centre to the centre director in terms of the financial management and the overall governance, that isn't possible under a PNC run model because of the legislation, the documents under which we're bound to act.
Sorry, can I just add to that? Yeah, is that okay? Effectively, and what that would look like in a day-to-day basis is similar to what it is now. So whilst I wouldn't be on the ACNC register, that the people that are on that are our approved provider, which is currently our OOSH subcommittee or OOSH parent management committee. And the way that they delegate those controls is through policies, which the policies would still exist. So whether they agree to move our current policies over because our policies do exist already and they can just re-endorse those policies or set new policies, that's how you delegate those roles and the management and all of that liability through policies, which the approved approve. Yeah.
I guess that's true. And sorry, I'm trying to find my camera, but I guess in some ways that's true, but not where the policies conflict with our constitution or our bylaws or the legislation for which we're bound under. So there is some conflicts between the current policies and the constitution and our bylaws and the legislation. Predominantly, we're concerned about the constitution and the legislation because the bylaws are able to be changed through voting of the membership. But, you know, particularly around the financial management that is under our constitution, that is unable to be changed without a change to legislation. Also, in terms of the office bearers' responsibilities, they remain, you know, and I guess it depends potentially on how much, you know, oversight those office bearers want to have, but ultimately it's the office bearers and those responsible people who are responsible. So, you know, where there is an incident, it is their responsibility to report and manage that and ensure that incident is managed appropriately, regardless of what any policy says. It is the responsibility.
In terms of incident management, our laws and regs will still exist, and that is the nominated supervisor's role. And the liability still will lie there for the nominated supervisor.
Yes, but unfortunately where we have, I guess, conflicting, and this is probably a conversation that needs to be undertaken at a higher level. I think the general answer to the question is certainly at a financial level. No one outside of the office bearers can release money from bank accounts. So that means certainly paying staff, purchasing resources and supplies is not able to be delegated. Certainly in terms of working with Children Check, we have to be the ones that are listed with the Office of the Children's Guardian to manage working with Children Check obligations. That cannot be delegated. And certainly things around recruitment and policy assurance and quality assurance cannot be delegated. So whilst there are certain things that we can delegate during the day-to-day running, and certain things we would not expect if someone broke their leg at OOSH, that we would need to come down and manage that injury, and that the centre director or the nominated supervisor has a certain level of oversight for that. There's a much higher degree of insight that we need to actually have in terms of the centre overall.
Julie, did you have
another question? Yes, so just another question from a while back. I was waiting if there was a thread that it connected to, though. Conscious of getting to the scenario around Carlingford, if that could be perhaps directed to, again, is there special circumstances surrounding that takeover?
Yeah, I can speak on that. We do have quite a close contact with Carlingford. So theirs is a completely different scenario. They haven't gone to tender. They were unfortunately not compliant. They had issues with their centre director, and unfortunately they had to call in just an emergency tender for a temporary situation. So the department recommended for different providers that they knew were capable of just picking up a service last minute and supporting them, and they picked one, and they've just come in on a 12-month contract. So they were not able to change things like fees or anything or make any of those decisions for that 12-month contract. They just had to come in and pick it up as is. So it's a completely different situation to what we're going through.
Julie, can I just check if there are any questions? I'm just conscious that it is getting late and we want to be able to sort of finish. And yeah, is there anything from your part, Julie? Adam, do you want to continue to the next?
Yeah, look, I think, you know, it's getting late and we do need to we started a little bit late due to technology problems, and yeah, we are starting to see people drop off. So we do need to sort of get through the material. I guess this is it really is and the fact that the questions are now starting to come thick and fast, I think this is exactly the reason why we need to ensure that we take measured steps to. I think we just need to make sure we have an opportunity for anyone who wants to have their say, and I think that this is a great starting to that process. But look, the priorities for us, the committee priorities. Let's look at them. Number one for me is making sure we continue our running our great service. We saw that the service is classified as exceeding. We've never singly had a question about whether or not the service is viable or compliant. We've had the odd incident here and there, and they've gone on the record correctly, and they've never seen fit to question whether or not we're doing a good job in terms of how we deal with those incidents. so that's essentially the number one priority for us. And so number two, is for me protecting our staff. This is obviously a trying time, and I certainly ask that everyone involved, we need to make sure we are dealing with this matter in a delicate fashion, and the fact that we are looking at the team who went through an amazingly tough time over the last 3 years, through the pandemic and a bunch of other stuff that got thrown at us. And at the end of the day, they stood by the TW community and operated a centre without misstep throughout the entire pandemic. And they stood by and dealt with all the changes to the legislation, to the health regulations, everything. To me, it was an amazing response. Obviously, the committee did a bunch of hard work too. We were calling extraordinary meetings, dealing with potentially furloughing staff. It was some quite jarring conversations we had to have. I've been around the block a few times in the corporate world, and those meetings were actually, in my mind, as being some of the toughest I've been part of. But at the end of the day, that's what we've signed up for as volunteers. And the comments earlier that running the $1 million service is hard. Well, yes, I got no answer for that. It is. But I'm proud that we've been able to steer the service through that. And I guess the main question for the community is to whether that continues or not. We've got 22 years of legacy that we need to decide, not necessarily in the coming weeks, but we do need to make a decision on what we're willing to do to protect that. So next slide. And so, where to from here? So, as I said, we just need to be mindful of how those decisions impact the staff. But we need to, I guess, I've covered a lot of this already, but to my point of view, I think we need to look at how we leverage the time the department has given us. The department has given us to 2024 to really lock in that decision.
2025.
No, well, in terms of the actual decision whether or not we're going down the PNC standpoint, if we sort of say no, we're not going down there, that's where we end up having to look at saying by January 2024 our license extends, and unless we've sort of really made a conscious decision to sort of continue down that process, I think we're probably going to look at facing a tender. So, but then the 2025 date comes into play when the complexity and I think we're discovering this right now. We're talking about what does that responsible person look like from a PNC standpoint? What do the policies look like? How does the delegations work? Things like this. A lot to unpack, and I personally think we owe it to the team and to the history that's sort of behind that, to really give that a chance to see if there is a path forward. And so that's my personal position, and I think it's also the position of the committee as well. So anyway, next slide. So that's it from me. Look, I think certainly agree with Mel there. Sign up to the PNC. Let's start actually supporting that organisation, because it means that we're sort of having to get closer. We need to make sure that we are actually having a voice, and anyone who sort of does feel OOSH is a valuable and precious asset to the community, then we need to basically make sure we have a voice. And otherwise, please feel free to reach out to the committee, to myself, you can contact me through the centre. I'm more than happy to answer questions personally or through regular communications. But otherwise, that's it from me.
So, Julie, have we any more questions for this evening?
We have the comment there to everyone. I can read that out. A comment around having worked as a director in the OOSH, this person during the time that the current legislation was introduced, they're thinking perhaps the P&C have misunderstood the responsible person roles, etc., and how that works. As the stakeholders, it's their responsibility to employ qualified educators who are capable of managing instances where illness and injury, which I'm sure they're all in agreement that the current staff are capable of, is the comment there in the chat.
So I guess that, you know, if the day came where the OOSH and the P&C were part of the same organisation, I guess, that would be the sort of thing that would need to be explored. My feeling would be that there would be time for that to follow, but the advice that Adam's given, and also that Mel gave as well around joining the P&C, is probably some of the best advice that I've heard. I think that's a really great thing, and the P&C have organised an extraordinary meeting to follow in December, and which gives that voting opportunity for everybody, provided you join prior to the next meeting. I think that's correct, Claire. I can sort of see you nodding. Great, that's fantastic. What I would say to everybody here, though, is every conversation that I've had with anybody has really focused on what's best for the kids. And Adam and I had a chat earlier on this week as we were planning the week, and Adam was saying to me, no matter what happens, the OOSH committee are committed to the best service that can be provided, whether that's in whatever format, and for the continuity. And I've had exactly the same comment from the P&C executive. Courtney, you have a unique perspective. You and I have both been nominated people of places before. You would understand that. I don't know if you've been following the chat, Courtney, and I appreciate you're an employee here, and that's a bit awkward as well, but I've put my comments in the side, which you've probably seen. Is there anything that you'd like to add just to leave everybody with tonight?
I mean, probably similar to what you've just said. I think our goal is continuity for the children, and I guess for our team as well. And we believe that the best way to maintain continuity is to go to P&C and keep it within community. There is too many unknowns going to tender for us, including whether we have jobs or not, including if we lose those relationships with our current children. And just a couple of things on the roles. The responsible person that I think the P&C we're referring to is just the people listed on the ACNC register, which that is correct. There's a different responsible person role within our regulations, which is what I think Laura was referring to in the question. So that is obviously a qualified person within our setting. So we do have a number of people that are qualified to be responsible people on a day-to-day basis. And then there's the nominated supervisor, which is me. So where some of the legal liability still does fall on the nominated supervisor, which is again different to the approved providers listed on the ACNC. So just a bit of clarification there. And then I think just in terms of the questions on whether we would retain our jobs, obviously we've said there is no guarantee. Whether they do or do not decide to keep us on or not, even if they do, there is still no guarantee that we will retain staff. We do know from other experiences that often Category C providers often pay award rates, whereas we currently pay above award to have those qualified and experienced educators. So we would be likely to lose a lot of the team. We'd be likely to lose a lot of quality programs because we ratio above the current ratio to provide extra things like extra curriculars and cooking experiences and a whole lot of different programming things that add to our quality. So we would lose a lot of that if we went to a Category C.
Thanks so much, Courtney. I think that probably gives the perspective from OOSH, which is really valuable here. So thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your attendance, P&C, OOSH, community. Sorry about the bumpy start, but we got here in the end. We have recorded this, and the intention is that the P&C and the OOSH will be able to send the recording out to anybody that did miss it this evening. Michelle has her hand up for a final comment, I guess, Michelle.
Yeah, I guess I find myself in a bit of a, I guess, as perhaps speaking on behalf of the committee, I think we are kind of all quite in lockstep here. We're in a little bit of a bind because of this special resolution business that has to be passed. And I guess I would just like to make a comment about that. As the committee, we have been very conscious to take steps that are commensurate with what is happening. So the first, and we have the mandate as a committee to do that. Unlike the PNC model, the TWISH committee is given the authority to make a decision. So we have decided as a committee to proceed with pursuing and enabling the PNC to pursue a due diligence. So that was what was the motion that was passed a few months ago. And that was what we thought we were working towards until this little bit of a curveball at the moment. So as Adam has said, we will at the right time go to our members once we have sort of all the facts lined up for a special resolution, possibly at the next AGM, possibly the one after, to be able to clarify that it is the will of the user. Our survey was a surrogate of that. As Adam has said, we have in no meeting have had more than 40 people, and that was an AGM. That was an unusual AGM. You should have seen all the committee were doing a dance at the end of it. We were so surprised at the outcome of that. So we felt that we wanted to check the sense. Yes, we wanted to know the feel of our people, and we thought that a survey was best. To give you a sense of how engaged people are on this topic, normally when the team sends out a vacation care survey, they get 10 responses for a vacation care service. The annual survey that we send to parents, they get about 20 families responding. With this particular survey, we had 79, of which 78 are unique families. So there is definitely keen interest, and we are acting as best as we can on what our people are saying to us. But we find ourselves in a little bit of a bind because of motions that have been passed, for example, by PNC, in relation to abstaining from any further conversation with us until we pass a resolution. It's a little bit of a chicken and egg. We don't know how to go. If we had passed any resolutions earlier, would it have stopped us coming to where we were today? Probably not. So, motions come and motions go. So we would just prefer to, I guess, proceed on a very common sense and, collegiate way and kind of talk about this openly. And when the time comes to make a proper vote, we will do that. We are accountable to our TWISH families, and we will not assume for a second that we know what people are thinking unless we're sure of it. So I guess we just would like that time to be able to do this. We keep coming back to it. The government has given us that extension, and we would like to see it. We cannot predict what the future is going to be like. We have no control over that, but we can, and we owe it to our community, as Adam has said, to exhaust every possible option, to work up how it would look like. Speak to the PNC OOSHs that are doing it well, speak to those that are not doing it well, look at what the pitfalls are, look at what the advantages and disadvantages are. I reckon collectively, if the community is willing, we can do this. Heck, we managed to navigate COVID. Like, it's hard for me not to get a bit, we surely we can do this. And if not, is there anything in the next 2.5 years that we can do to lobby for change? If it's an impossible model, why was it put there in the first place? What is the reason behind that? Can we get that going? Can we get a discussion going at a higher level? Maybe it's time to talk to other people to kind of go, well, how did we end up here with an impossible model? So yeah, look, I just think that if we were to rush any decisions in the next couple of months just to do it in time before Christmas, I think we'll be shortchanging ourselves and the community. And yes, it will be a forced decision. And yes, everyone will sign up and make a forced decision. But we wouldn't be able to convince ourselves that we have done our absolute best to explore this. And I guess, sorry, that's how I'll stop. I'm aware that we need to put children to bed and everything. But yeah, time is what we need, and time is actually what we have. So those are not actually contradiction. And I suppose to offer an alternative view, I don't see not making a decision now as prolonging uncertainty. I see it, in fact, as giving certainty to the community for the next 2.5 years. So just a different point of view and a different perspective. Yeah.
So I guess, you know, obviously, you know, there may be many that share Michelle's view, but the advice from Adam and Mel about being financial members of the PNC and the PNC's arrangements for a vote in December would allow a variety of views to be aired through a democratic process, which I think is probably a reasonable sort of comment. Adam, Mel, any closing comments before we head off to bed?
No, I think my point of view, well, thanks everyone for attending. Sorry, Mel had jumped in first, but you go. I was just going to say thanks to everyone for attending.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you to everybody for taking the time on a Thursday night to come and attend. I think, as we say, just signing up to become members of the PNC, and obviously having that special meeting on the 7th will allow everybody to do that. And just, you know, even if it is the will of the membership to undertake that due diligence, you know, we're unable to take any steps forward unless, you know, we've had that information in the form of that carried special resolution, you know, to take any steps forward in terms of the due diligence process. So it's really up to the community to actually make a decision about how we can take this forward, and that's both the community of the PNC and the community of the OOSH service about how we can move this forward.
Excellent, everybody. Thank you so much for your attendance. I hope you all sleep tight. We'll see you at school tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.